You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome to Mission Log the Orville, a Roddenberry podcast where we follow the crew of the U.S.S. Orville and open that jar of pickles to savor the messages and morals found inside. My name is Mike Richards, podcaster, consulting producer on Mission Log, and a lifelong Star Trek fan.
And I'm Jessica Lynn, Verdi, podcaster, gamer, streamer, actor, improviser, also lifelong Star Trek fan. I'm a jack of all trades and a master of most of them. This is a Roddenberry podcast, so we'll be watching each episode of The Orville, and we'll be looking for themes like optimism, diversity, inclusion, and curiosity, or some people will call it the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. So why is Roddenberry interested in doing a podcast on The Orville?
Well, it's a really interesting hybrid of Star Trek-inspired sci-fi and comedy created by Seth MacFarlane, who, by the way, is a huge Star Trek fan. I mean, he called Star Trek a grand vision of the future. He appeared in 2 episodes of Enterprise, and he's gone on record saying that Star Trek adheres to an ethical code, even during difficult moral dilemmas. I mean, it's obvious that he gets it. And it makes sense that they would do it this way. Science fiction is the perfect medium to look at issues from a global perspective. Star Trek, the original series, combined a popular genre in the 60s, like Westerns, with sci-fi to create Wagon Train to the Stars. Now Seth MacFarlane has taken his forte, satire, and mashed it up with sci-fi to create a modern storytelling device to explore the human condition.
He's not doing it alone, so let's not forget that executive producer Brandon Braga got his start on The Next Generation as an intern, and then he goes on to become a staff writer and co-producer of Next Gen. Then he was the executive producer of Voyager and Enterprise, and he's collaborated also with Seth MacFarlane before on Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Safe to say that all came together, and we're going to see a lot of Star Trek influence on The Orville. In case you're not familiar with the show, or if it's been a while since you've watched it, here's what you need to know. The U.S.S. Orville is a 25th century mid-level exploratory vessel in the Planetary Union, which you can think of as kind of a united federation of planets.
Oh, interesting.
Or an alliance between Earth and many other planets.
What a fresh idea. We have Ed Mercer. He's played by Seth MacFarlane himself, and he's the captain of the U.S.S. Orville.
And Commander Kelly Grayson, played by Adrian Palicki. She's brilliant, she's hardworking, and she's the Orville's executive officer.
Even though our relationships aren't defined by what a man is to us, she's also the ex-wife of Seth MacFarlane's character.
I didn't want to define her as that.
Okay, never mind. Cut that part out. Dr. Claire Finn is the chief medical officer, is played by, I felt like it was okay if I said it. You know what I
totally.
mean? Okay, Dr. Claire Finn is the chief medical officer. She's played by Penny Johnson-Gerald. She's an expert in molecular surgery, DNA engineering, and psychiatry. And like she says, she likes to go where she's needed, and we're going to need her here on the Orville for sure.
And we love that she's around, from Next Gen to Deep Space Nine to 24. She's done amazing work, and she continues that right here on the Orville. Second Officer Lieutenant Commander Bordas is played by Peter Macon. He's a Moclan whose husband Clyden lives on the ship with them as well.
I love that. I love those characters. Chief of Security Lieutenant Alara Katan is played by Halston Sage. She's a Zelayan, and she is super strong, but mostly because her planet has high gravity.
And Lieutenant Gordon Malloy, played by Scott Rhimes, who we love for so many reasons. Great singer, great actor. Been watching him since
singer.
The 1990s when he was on Party of Five, way back then.
I was too young for that.
He's considered the best helmsman in the fleet. Sadly, he was grounded for, well, we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We have Navigator Lieutenant John Lamar, played by the wonderful Jay Lee. He's he's also like an amazingly skilled helmsman, and he's super smarter than he lets on. So he's got an interesting arc that we'll talk about more as well.
Well, and then we have on the other end of the spectrum, Science and Engineering Officer Isaac. He's played by Mark Jackson. He's a Kalan, an artificial, non-biological life form with, well, he's got a little bit of a superiority complex.
Interesting. And then we are going to talk about Norm Macdonald, he plays Lieutenant Yaphet. He's our gelatinous engineer. Sadly, right before we started this podcast, Norm passed away in September 2021. And he was going through a private battle of leukemia for 9 years.
And now, old wounds. Prologue. Welcome to New York City, circa 2418. Commander Ed Mercer arrives home just in time to find his wife, Kelly Grayson, with a Retepsian named Derulio. While Kelly is surprised to see Ed, Ed is even more surprised when Derulio blooshes all over his wife, and just like that, it's over between them. Act 1. 1 year later, Commander Mercer meets with Admiral Halsey. You see, even though the year has been rough on Ed, with the tardiness, and the sloppiness, and the hungoveriness, the Planetary Union is aware that Ed is a capable officer. Besides, the Union has 3,000 ships to staff, and they need captains. Suffice to say, this may be Ed's last opportunity to prove himself. It's not a heavy cruiser. It's a mid-level exploratory vessel called the U.S.S. Orville, whose captain retired last month. He'll just need a helmsman and an XO. Ed knows a helmsman, but the XO will be supplied by the fleet. With that, Captain Mercer is off to visit his old friend Gordon Malloy. While Gordon's piloting skills are legendary, his phallic artistry is really where his reputation stands out. So much so that he's been relegated to a desk job and testing his Samurai Ogre program in the environmental simulator. But now, with Ed in his corner, he'll be back in space where he belongs. Act 2. After an interesting ride to the Orville, captain and crew are together for the first time. The senior staff includes Chief of Security Alara Katan, a Zelayan with superior strength, Navigator John Lamar, also an accomplished helmsman, Second Officer Bordas, a Mocklin with an impressive bladder, Chief Medical Officer Claire Finn, who goes where she's needed, and she's pretty sure she'll be needed here, and finally Isaac, a synthetic humanoid with a superiority complex. Act 3. The Orville is underway to resupply the Epsilon 2 research station when word comes down that the ship's new XO will rendezvous en route. While that may seem like great news, it turns out the new XO is none other than Kelly Grayson, Captain Mercer's ex-wife. Although Ed objects, he doesn't have the clout to overturn the decision, being it's his first day on the job. As Captain and XO meet in Ed's office, an awkward conversation devolves into an exercise in the dangers of reopening old wounds. While they both agree to work together, Kelly offers to transfer as soon as the new XO becomes available. Act 4. At Epsilon 2, the station's director, Dr. Aronoff, confesses that the station doesn't need supplies. It does, however, need protection from the Krill, an aggressive reptilian species that we may just see again. At the station, Mercer, Grayson, Finn, and Katan are given a timid tour of the facility, as well as some modified redwood seeds that can grow in any environment. More to the point, a recent breakthrough in temporal science allows them to accelerate time inside a quantum bubble. This tech can be used to grow crops overnight or heal wounds instantly, but it can also be used as a weapon to turn entire armies into frail elders instantly. Act 5. A Krill destroyer arrives just as a plot unfolds to steal the quantum accelerator. Katan grabs the device as the rest of the team fight their way to the shuttle. Meanwhile, Bordas, in command of the Orville, provides cover for the returning landing party. Gordon Malloy shows off his piloting skills as he not only hugs the donkey, which he's been doing since flight school, but also maneuvers the ship precisely to allow Captain Mercer and team to enter the landing bay. Act 6. Although the landing party is back on the bridge, the Orville is beaten. The Krill demand the quantum accelerator, but Kelly has a plan. Transport the device to the Krill ship with a modified redwood seed glued to the pointy end. Once aboard, the ship is activated, and a fully grown redwood tree destroys the enemy ship. The captain says victoriously, "It's Arbor Day." Realizing nobody knows what Arbor Day is, Ed asks the XO what she would have said. Kelly replies, "I would have said, 'You got wood.'" Turns out she'll fit in with the crew just fine. Back in space dock, Kelly tells Ed that she'll be transferring off the ship, but Ed asks her to stay. She's a great problem solver. She saved the ship. She saved the crew, and they're stronger with her than without her. Commander Grayson tells Admiral Halsey that she'll be staying on the Orville. Halsey asks if Ed knows she called in a favor to get him the command. She says no, and she'd like to keep it that way. The end.
You recapped what was an excellent pilot of this show, and it's a well-written pilot for any TV show, honestly.
It really was. There was great character development. You could see the range. Like even like a mini character arc inside the episode, which I loved a lot. And well, you know what else we got?
What?
We got Rob Lowe. He's got some range, doesn't he?
Oh, hold on. Who do you mean by Rob Lowe? Are you?
Rob Lowe was who Kelly was in bed with at the beginning of the episode.
Are you flippin' kidding me?
No, not even a little bit.
I didn't know that. I was excited to share that Norm Macdonald is the blob that he steps through. And, we just lost Norm Macdonald, and I was so excited. I didn't know, Norm Macdonald, we didn't know he was sick and why he wasn't in so much. So I was excited to see that he had actually been somewhat busy in the last couple of years. I did not know that it was Rob Lowe.
Oh yeah, he played Derulio, and he blooshed.
He blooshed.
Blooshed all over the lampshade apparently as well.
Do you know how hard it is to get it out of curtains?
No kidding.
Now what I find is interesting about that moment is, he may have been close to blooshing, but the fact that he blooshed after being intruded upon might have spoken to a kink or two.
It certainly may have. Like he may have needed the audience. I'm not sure where.
Well, and the excitement of being caught, and that's. I think there was some sort of thing. Wow, you just blew my mind already. Oh, hold on. You just blooshed my mind.
Blooshed your mind. Okay, we may have just found the title for this episode.
She doesn't look bluish. But then it's so interesting because she's in the weirdest position to get blooshed on. I don't know. Anyway, this is a PG episode. We're just going to keep it that way.
I think we're infringing upon the
what? Leave it to me to find the edge of space and the line. So
quite all right. Hey, I just set it up. You hit it out of the park. So that's.
God.
I think we're finding our groove here.
Our stride.
Our stride. So how about the ogre, huh?
Poor Justin. And also, I think Grayson might be a sociopath. So just a real quick recap. Like you had mentioned, Gordon, he is just busy, he's basically a holodeck program fighting an ogre he created. Have you ever watched Cowboy Bebop by any chance?
Yes.
So I was just watching the third or fourth episode. I just finished Cowboy Bebop for the fourth time. So I went into Watanabe's Samurai Champloo. I've never watched it before, and it's also English dubbed by Steve Bloom, and I was excited to see what was up. The samurais fight what people thought were an ogre in a camp. So it's pretty similar.
Man, there's a lot of outside influence that you can see in there, and I'm sure that definitely might have been one. Also, we chatted about Grayson, Kelly Grayson, Mr. Spock's mom. Known mostly as Amanda, last named Grayson, from the original series and the later movies. So I wonder if that is maybe a little homage to some Star Trek canon, if you will.
Well, and I was definitely going to say the naming is so good because you really can. It wouldn't surprise me if Seth MacFarlane got really close to buying the IP, or maybe he realized there was a huger responsibility, and not that he couldn't just make his own episode or his own TV show. He would have to make movies and stuff like that. Who knows? But Epsilon drops right into that.
Right out of the motion picture.
Yeah, it's all these easy homages that would work perfectly and have worked in, you don't know you're not listening to a Star Trek show, basically.
Right. And I tried to, I had to look up some of the terms. I was writing things like holodeck, environmental simulator is what they call it. So everything's just changed a little bit differently. But I don't know that I would have accepted Captain Mercer's justification for Gordon's phallic artistry by saying he draws a lot on a lot of different things. Like, that doesn't make it okay.
No, it definitely doesn't. But is it bad also? Like, where's the line here? These people are it's very interesting Well,
And we don't know what the mores and customs and what's considered tasteful art in 2419 is going to be.
My guess, 2024. My guess is if it's getting brought up by an admiral, it's probably like a misdemeanor versus like
Probably
like,
at least frowned upon.
it's just frowned upon. Like, oh, that's his characteristic,
Yeah.
But the casualness of the crew and the joking nature is obviously a distinction from a Star Trek show, but doesn't make it any less impactful in the morals and things like that of the storytelling.
It doesn't, and I purposely kept some of the silliness out of the recap, just because it didn't necessarily add to the plot, and it I wanted to kind of concentrate on the things that did make it more in line with that sort of Roddenberry-esque Star Trek episode. But I did think that environmental simulator scene was fun. I loved
fun.
Justin.
I bet you, though, if you took an episode of The Next Generation and said that Seth MacFarlane wrote it and just, cut the camera a little bit differently, every time you get, a look from Riker or, Troy is you could have a comedy there, too. And
You sure can.
And they didn't. The Orville doesn't browbeat us with comedy. You can see where Seth finds, a couple of the jokes that need, he moves the Krill into center of the camera.
Yes.
Which is just super, super, meta for anyone in Hollywood. But also, or did you see the dog licking the balls?
First thing I saw.
First thing I saw. And I love also how the two helmsmen best friends right now. Oh, see, here's the thing: is I'm gonna go boom, boom, boom all over the place, Mike.
Please do.
I know. I need you to keep me in check because we're gonna go all over.
I'll do my best because I didn't put that in my notes. I was trying to keep it limited, but John Lamar, I really think that that little, I'll call it maybe a B plot. C plot, E plot, whatever.
You mean just wanting to have soda on the deck? Is that?
Well, and because when he was introduced, he was like, "Okay, navigator John Millar. It says here you're I think he said a level 8 helmsman as well, an accomplished helmsman." And here he is as a navigator, which typically, pilots, helmsman, the person driving the ship is maybe a little bit higher. On the totem pole than a navigator is. So how did he feel about that? And I think he was kind of like, man, it is what it is. Can I have my soda on the bridge?
Or he's not ambitious, right? Or he's like totally chill. It's kind of
did.
like Riker going, I'm cool with being number one for now.
And he definitely was totally just chill with that.
Because he asked about soda, it's a perfect comedic setup to go look at the high accolades you expect a really highbrow person, and you go I just want a soda, and then they're in almost a fight, and he's drinking his soda, or they're about to take off and he's drinking his soda. We know exactly what that guy is all about, and that's the challenge of a pilot too, a pilot episode, also a helmsman, is. In one word or less, get us to know these characters and get their vibe, but make it feel like we haven't seen the prototype or the archetype over and over again. And
right.
Seth is a pro at that.
And I could definitely see some buddy adventures in the future for those two. So
definitely a couple of away missions if they call them that.
I really did like those two, and I loved maybe a little bit in the background that maybe John Lamar was kind of like, well, skipped over again, or another guy got it, but just took it like put the needs of the ship ahead of his own needs and his own ambitions. So I liked that. I thought it was pretty cool.
I'm interested to see what a post George Floyd world will bring us in season 3 with that character too. I don't know anything about anything coming up, but I would be interested. What Star Trek does so well, and it's so funny when people say that Star Trek isn't political. It absolutely is a certain reflection of the times.
Certainly.
That 1960s, those women are wearing miniskirts because it was a pro-feminist move.
Yes.
And empowerment, and that's the tip of the iceberg of the political commentary that the 1960s makes, and then so on and so forth. So there is a fun and lovely responsibility that these futuristic shows can choose to take on as a reflection for us peons that are stuck in the 21st century to have an interesting reflection. And I wonder if they take up that mantle well.
I am sure they do. I did not. Spoiler alerts. Going forward, jumping the timeline a little bit. I have watched. All of the 26 episodes produced, and they do a wonderful job of doing what I think science fiction does best when science fiction is done well, and that's taking a look at issues from a global perspective.
Beautiful. I don't know that you don't want to get hit over the head with it, but you do want it, what these shows have the opportunity to do, and Star Trek does so well, and I can already sense that the Orville will do, but with a very humorous undertone, is give us an example of what it can be like. We're not without conflict, but we have the precedent to overcome these really weird things that we're going through in our society now.
If there's any time we need a little bit of perspective, I think it's now. But
true enough.
Speaking of, you just mentioned the humor that they kind of slide into that, and there was a little bit. There were so many funny one-liners in the show. Hi, I'm Captain Ed Mercer. This is my Chief Medical Officer, Claire Finn, and my ex-wife, Kelly Grayson.
Actually, I want to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off from your thought because this can wait. Go for it.
Oh no, but I was just going to say there were a lot of fears and trepidation first that this was going to be Family Guy in space, or that it might be a Star Trek parody. Like I don't know if anybody. I'm sure you're not old enough to remember a show called Quark on in the '70s, which was a Star Trek parody. If you're not familiar with it,
I did not know anything about that.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with it, May 7th episode of Sci-Fi 5 covers it, so you can check it out there.
Did I do that one? I don't think so.
No, I think Ryan did that one.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to the point where I've done too many where I don't know what I've talked about, but the details of what I've talked about can go away.
And that was more of like a kind of on the level of Spaceballs, or like a Mel Brooks style parody that was just in it for the slapstick.
Totally. Which
this has so
place.
much more to it. Yeah.
People like McDonald's as well as, Laurie's Steakhouse or
Good,
whatever.
but you were saying.
So, I think as a good umbrella for this whole recap and what we're talking about is, again, we don't want to feel like it's parody of any Star Trek, but you have all of the major character needs met in his team. You have the android who plays both the Spock kind of character or the Data character. You have the young, security officer who's excited, who's kind of like your Chekhov, maybe your Wesley Crusher, but a certain, more respected than that. You have the doctor who is 100% going to be the Bones.
100%. And I loved the way he was like, why are you here? You could be on any ship you want to be. And she said, I go where I think I'll be needed, and I think I'll be needed here.
It's the best slight, and also the best. She's a total badass, and what you can see why she was cast. She delivered that with the perfect blend of arrogance and confidence,
and just played wonderful.
And you said it perfectly here that, and I hadn't considered it, that Grayson is what we would have gotten out of Majel's character in the pilot, The Cage, if we had gotten to see more of that number one.
I really feel like that is, maybe her character was informed by that, or just maybe as a strong, no nonsense female first officer that they've kind of got the same character DNA running through the two of them. So I made that connection, and we'll get to see new things, hopefully in Strange New Worlds.
Yes, and I'm excited for that. I love that didn't have to go away, right? That she didn't have to just be relegated to the nurse or the voice of the computer. I don't know if you heard, when we first heard the computer's voice, it had a very Majel sounding voice to it. That being said, to your point with having to change environment simulator, the things like that, I couldn't help but listen to the swiping of the doors or what their warp sounded like. I bet you sound design had just a challenge trying to not make it sound like a door sound.
Trying to make it sound 25% different at least.
Yes,
but
100%.
still knowing what you were doing. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if I could circle back to Alara Katan's character, and I was kind of saving it for the next segment, but since you brought it up, I didn't really like when the captain asked, "How old are you?"
Yeah.
Should not make a difference. She is the chief security officer.
Yeah.
Could be viewed as ageist. Could be used as even he didn't ask him any of the men their age as well. So it just kind of it was just a little bit prickly when I heard that.
Here's what I'm going to say. We're going to unpack that in the next segment. Well, welcome back to segment 2. welcome back to the first podcast of the Orville, Mission Long, the Orville, and we're unpacking the first pilot. Wait, there's only one pilot.
Correct. So this is the one and only pilot. That is a very un-Star Trek thing to have, only one pilot.
Only one. That's so true. Well, that we know of. We don't know if this is the first swing that they took.
That's true. The Cage didn't air until 1988 during a writer's strike. Interestingly enough, when TV show stations were just scrounging for programming. So let's see, 2018 plus about 23 years, maybe 2040 something. We'll get to see the unaired pilot.
Maybe be so lucky. Hopefully we'll still have a job by that point.
I'll leave that up to you to watch.
We'll see what happens. I'll let you know. I'll visit you in the home.
So when last we spoke, prior
Speaking
to
about age,
our transition, we mentioned that the captain said, "You're chief of security. How old are you?" And kind of put her in a position where she had to, one, state her age, which I think is nobody's business, and also justify why she was there when she said that there aren't many Zelayans in the Planetary Federation, so they tend to get fast-tracked. And I found that just a little bit prickly.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So there is a thing in the acting world where you're not, anyway, in every world, you shouldn't ask for someone's age. It's illegal, right? Like,
right.
You cannot be discriminated against based on your age. Thus, an employer can't ask. And in acting, every now and then they'll try and get sneaky and ask what your age is, and they're not legally allowed to ask for an audition what your age is unless you're a minor. And I get the point that they're trying to illustrate, which is that she's not going to be taken seriously, right? And it's interesting because you know how Gordon turns around and goes, "Aren't you super strength?" Or maybe Lamar, you have super strength? Right. And she does have a kind of swagger about that, like that I ended up skipping ahead to the second and third episode. That she kind of, that doesn't stick with her. She obviously has some confidence in what she brings to the table.
She does. And what's really neat about the episode is that while I think the comment sounded like it was to express maybe a little bit of lack of confidence in a young security chief. It also, I think, was maybe throwing a little bit of shade at affirmative action and that kind of program, because she said, "I'm Zelayan. There's not a lot of Zelayans in the Federation. Excuse me, the Union. So they tend to fast track us." And he said, "Well, I hope they know what they're doing." In truth and in fact, yeah, he said that. He said, "Well, I hope they know what they're doing," or "I'm sure they know what they're doing," that kind of thing. In truth and in fact, when you look for talent in places you haven't otherwise looked, you find more talent, not less.
Right. And you're competing against the right people. Like, you're competing, like, if you give everyone a fair chance, everyone will do better, truly, right? Like what is it? Rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I watched a documentary recently on Netflix about the lack of female directors in Hollywood on projects, and it was actually FX that took that to heart and went looking for as much diversity as they could, and they went from like worst to first as far as programming goes in that period of time. Where the fear is that if you give jobs to people based on demographics rather than experience, that the quality would go down. And what they found is that the quality actually went up because they looked for talent in places that they weren't looking.
They're not giving jobs. They're challenging their own biases in order to look elsewhere, as opposed to like, oh, I know this guy Jimmy, he's really good at this, and kind of keeping the pool singular. It's certainly not like, okay, cool, this person is black, let's give them the job. It's let's not use our biases and not say that they can't apply. So
yes,
you
exactly
are getting like, think about it. Loki was I don't know if you watched any of the Loki.
Sure did.
A female director and like a hugely female crew behind the scenes, and that show does not suffer for it.
No, it doesn't. And it just, if you keep doing what you always did, you're just going to keep getting what you always got. And to open these things up to competition, to let more people try out, to let more people share their ideas and do things, it's only going to get better.
And you see that world reflected in early Star Trek 1960s for the most part.
Right.
I have a theory that partly why the reason the Cage didn't make it to air, or like why we don't have people that are in love with Pike like we are with Kirk, is that people weren't necessarily comfortable with a female number one at that time. I think it was still a little too forward thinking. That's like my little private theory. But you still see women having effect and diversity being important in that futuristic world, and Seth doesn't disappoint. But it is interesting because it is a weirdly prejudiced thing to go, how old are you? And
it was,
and she's too young, it seems, to say, well, screw you, sir.
Right.
Why? You know what I mean? To know that she shouldn't answer that.
Yeah, and she certainly shouldn't have had to say, well, they put me in this position because I'm a Zelayan. Now, knowing the character the way we did through the end of the show, and I think maybe she's holding, like you said, a little something back. Like I've got the skills. You're going to have to see that on your own, and we do see it even by the end of this episode, which may be a little bit more for the next segment. So maybe we can come back that again after we talk about another couple of after we wrap up this segment.
I think we're going to find a lot out of Alara that a lot of us can relate to in many different ways. But I'm so grateful that you pointed that out. I think it might have stuck out for me, but there's also sometimes we're like, oh, you're 19 and you're so smart. Mm-hmm. I loved when people thought I was young and smart. It's something weird compliment. But then I realized the older I got, I was like, oh, when you're 19, you think you know everything, and people are just being patronizing.
Well, I tell you what, the only thing that's keeping me interested. I think I've given up on interesting a long time ago, but interested in many, many new things. I really try to surround myself by younger folks. There's a little bit of an age gap between us. I'll let our other people try to figure out if that's true or not. But getting new perspectives and new, just new thoughts and ways of doing things is so much better than listening to people my own age just rail against the wind.
And we do this in my podcast, You Don't Know, Nick, where we are railing against Gen Z. There's a lot of people that hated the millennials that were coming up, and it only makes it harder for you to stay relevant and aware of how the world is the more you fight against the younger generation, because you just can't help it. So I think I do want to talk a little bit, and you have it here in your bullet points. The breakup between Amanda, even though I would cheat on my husband for Rob Lowe any day, no matter what kind of face mask he's wearing. Uh-huh. But, Ed, we find out at the end of the episode that Kelly basically finagled him onto a ship to help him.
Yeah. So the beginning of the show, we meet Ed, and obviously he's the victim of, he perceives himself as the victim of,
infidelity.
Infidelity. Good word. And
that lying cheater.
Sure. And he had a really tough year, and it just shows like how much loss and how much pain that he was in to get that second chance. But he said things at the beginning of the show to Admiral Halsey, played by Victor Garber, who I just love.
Lovely.
Anything he does, whether it be the Titanic or Legends of Tomorrow, just phenomenal actor. And Ed said, I want this. I've wanted to be on an exploratory vessel my whole life. This is what I've always wanted. A lot of I's, a lot of me's in there. when he was chatting with Kelly when they met in his office after they rendezvoused and they had that first meet as Captain and XO. He said, "This is my ship. This is my life. Why are you messing with me?" And
Wow.
she said, "Look, I know I wronged you. I just want to try to help. I knew you didn't have an XO. I thought I could help out." So at the beginning of the episode, he was very, very, very quite singularly focused on himself, and just kind of look at his evolution just over the course of one episode. So now he's able to put that aside and take advantage of the fact that Kelly is there to help and use her suggestion to transport the redwood seed over to the Krill ship and save that. If it was truly him just sort of competing with her and trying to be more concerned with being right than doing what's right, then he would have just not taken her advice. Look at even how he approached Alara Katan at the end, with the famous expression from the show, "Could you open this jar of pickles for me?" And she did. She knocked the door down, and then he gave her the device to get safely to the shuttle. So now he's gaining respect for the rest of his crew and learning to trust them and think bigger picture than just himself. So I love to see that evolution in Captain Mercer just in that short amount of time.
And I don't know that we've seen an example of that in Star Trek too. We usually dropped into a show maybe we see that in, what's the J.J. Abrams called that line
the Kelvinverse?
Yes, where he's super confident about himself and singularly focused and has to learn how to also lead. But most of the shows that we watch for Star Trek drop into a very competent captain who loves their crew. So it is an interesting. We get to learn to love Ed by learning to trust him, and he trusts us.
So exactly right. Like I as much as I love the original series and can watch those stories now and at a different time in my life, pick different things out of it than I could when I was a kid, when it was just a cool action adventure show. Now I watch it and I'm like, holy cow, that even applies today. We saw more character development, I think, from Ed Mercer in episode 1 than we saw from James T. Kirk in the entire 3 seasons of the original series.
Or now, Picard in the first 2 seasons.
Oh, yeah, sure, exactly. Not throwing shade at either of those two, because we did learn a lot more about Kirk's background, love life,
totally.
offspring in the movies and later on. But from episode to episode to episode, sometimes he was tired, sometimes he was grumpy, sometimes he was short-tempered, sometimes he was suave, sometimes he was debonair. But there was never anything that really went from one episode to the next. And just that from the beginning where Captain Mercer was just thinking about himself and how things would affect him, by the end he was thinking about how it would affect the ship and how it would affect the crew.
Everything's fine. I promise.
Okay. Oh, good.
Well, no, and I love that. I love that perspective. I have one question though, because I don't know that Kelly is in the right to say you weren't there, and I found my comfort in the arms of another. Whatever, she can have that. That's the hill she can die on. But why didn't they work together before this? If they were both in Starfleet, why didn't they find the opportunity to be together there? And what fast track, like what course, and maybe we find this out as the season carries on, and like what was he doing that kept him away from home so much? Why was it that that wasn't something that they discussed? Obviously the communication skills weren't amazing to begin with, and why didn't they discuss what being in the Union was like
the Planetary Union,
right?
I think there were a couple of things that I think were maybe intimated and not or implied and not shown. For one, Ed didn't seem particularly surprised to walk in on with Kelly and Blue Rob Lowe. It was just sort of like, all right, this is it. I'm not doing this again. It appeared also from the conversation that Ed had with Admiral Halsey that he was a quite promising, young officer in the Union. So that at that point, prior to the divorce, maybe he was just working all the time and really trying to, climb that ladder. So those are kind of the two things that I did put together there.
Because that's what made it sort of hard. His flippancy about catching her in bed, but then learning he had a really hard year. I know that we all process grief differently.
Right.
But this is not someone who shows their emotions, especially probably because it's not easy for Seth MacFarlane to show his emotions on his face in general. And I mean that with all due respect. He's a stoic-ish person.
Sure.
So I find it interesting. It makes sense that in his behavioral patterns, he's not handling himself well. But how has he rebounded? Has he actually rebounded?
No.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
he has not. It was, he said, I did a lot of work to put this behind me, or I thought he didn't put anything behind him.
Yeah.
He was, like I said, he had a very tough year. I think he maybe tried to compartmentalize things and forget about it, but I don't think he dealt with it head on.
Which is
whatsoever.
so irresponsible to put this man as a captain in space. If that, like that's what will do it. Like, let's let him work out his trauma in space. That sounds great. And let's put us in a literal room that we can't leave we cannot leave. Oh, God.
And he even said, obviously you're not a first choice, but we have 3,000 ships and we need captains. So, no, I don't think he successfully worked on anything that year. I do think that Kelly may have. I mean, she was able to show up and be very vulnerable and be like, look, this is the thing that I am most sorry for in my life. If I could take it back, I would. So, having said that, it does sound like it was sort of a one and only one-off occurrence. Now that, put in that perspective.
They definitely fought a lot. There was definitely a lot of, and we'll unpack that, I'm sure, as the season goes on. And the question that I have for myself as we do watch as I get to see the show for the first time, I wonder why Kelly isn't an officer, why she isn't a captain. I wonder what is holding, unless it doesn't interest her. She certainly has the capabilities. So
she certainly does. Just maybe an experience level. It may be.
It very well could be. I'm just curious to see.
He may be in longer. She certainly seems competent, and capable of doing it. But maybe just holding off for a little while. Maybe holding off to kind of try to, like she said, atone for something she's sorry about, even if she's sort of doing it from behind the curtain. And I think that's
I look
admirable.
forward to seeing, hopefully, a motivation to her own life story as opposed to just getting Ed's forgiveness. I look forward to, I imagine that will happen. I'm sure it's a perfect way to get a pilot kicked off, is have a woman be motivated by a man. And let's see how that evolves. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
it does. So what do you think we learned from this episode?
I remember why I didn't follow through with watching the rest of the series is I don't think I had live TV at the time, and I forgot which night this show was airing on. I remember watching the pilot as it aired and then forgetting that it existed because I wasn't a subscriber to that channel. I didn't watch that channel frequently enough to be reminded. Now, Grey's Anatomy, I always know that's on Thursday nights, so I'm not going to miss it. But
season 326 premiered last night.
Was it last night?
Yeah.
I missed it. So I'm a liar, I guess. I'll go back on Hulu and watch it. But I can see, I can't wait to watch it. It wasn't for lack of enjoying it, to say the least. Every expectation of, is this just going to be Family Guy? Is this just going to be Seth MacFarlane wishing it was Ted? Seth MacFarlane wishing it was Ted. It is, in its own right, an homage, and it's a standalone story as well.
It really is. I loved the fact that by the end of the episode, not just Ed, I feel like he was able to put his personal feelings aside, for the good of the crew. He went from looking at how Kelly's presence would affect him to how it would benefit the ship. And I think that was a really, really important lesson when you're dealing with personal, interpersonal issues. You have your feelings, but then there's also the reality of how people can benefit and help one another if you're able to put those issues aside.
And there's nothing wrong with a will they or won't they. And we all know from Sam and Diane how not to do it. There's literally a formula of when to let them will they and when to let them won't they. And if anything, catching us with that. At first, you may not know why they like each other or did like each other, and by the end of this episode, you know why they did, and we like her too. We don't hate her for being a cheater.
No, I love Adrienne Palicki in the show. I really do. I think she's got a great ability to deliver a good one-liner.
Which
and
you know he cast for that. He needed someone to not be funnier than him, but be. And if people who don't know what that bell is, it's my cat who's sitting right in front of me, or maybe someone's trying to call me home for dinner. She was a great sidekick to how Seth MacFarlane writes and acts.
Yes, and she can also deliver sort of get right back to being an intimidating presence.
I'm going to say, though, I'm going to go on record. You've Got Wood is not better than Arbor Day.
It's funny because I loved It's Arbor Day. Like, I laughed out loud and clapped when he said that. And I thought the conversation was funny about nobody knows what it is. And somebody's like, well, I know what it is. And he goes, well, what would you have said?
I think it was the android.
I do. I think it was too, because he knows everything. He's an android. He's
exactly.
Well, I know what it is.
And again, all these like little side throwaway things are us in 21st century. A lot of people didn't know what Arbor Day was until there was a hashtag about it. Yep. But You Got Wood. I don't know. I don't think it's as funny.
I don't think it's as witty. No. But I do think it helped her get accepted by members of the crew, probably better, but which also is a great thing to do as a leader.
Let's not. Yeah, he knows. Like, we'll see how. Yeah, there's so many more things we'll unpack for episode 2 or 3 that I'm looking forward to with regards to that. But let's not forget, they're joking about having just killed a bunch of people.
No kidding. I know.
I mean, the Krills suck. We can already tell.
Yeah, but, we can. Although they did start to get some decent marriage counseling out of the Krill commander, who is slightly off center to our frame.
Marriages work. Again, they have lives. We just learned, and we just destroyed them. And if they'll have any sort of arc as we move forward, we may get a Krill on the ship because we see Klingons moving forward, and maybe they won't be like Romulans, essentially.
We do, yeah. I think they can definitely be. I think there's a lot of potential there. Krill. They kind of reminded me a little first of Krall from the Star Trek Beyond.
Okay.
Fair. Idris Elba's character in one of his states definitely in one of his states of being during that movie, which changed a number of times. But
he actually kind of have a vibe of the baddie in Galaxy Quest too.
Yeah, they do.
A little bit.
They certainly do. And another thing I was thinking about this is kind of Roddenberry-esque, that understanding that your point of view is only part of the bigger picture. Where Ed was concentrating on his pain and his loss and his goals. But by the end, I think he was able to respect Kelly's position and at least understand that he could have done things differently and he could have done things better.
Are you sure it's not because he doesn't want to get back together? Maybe she's about to leave and he goes, "Oh, look at that butt! That is a good butt."
While I can only speculate on his motives.
There we go.
What I saw was somebody realizing that the ship, the crew would be better off with her.
There's many layers to it, and like I said, it gets the romantic contingency going. Maybe they'll have redemption,
Yep.
and.
Yeah.
Knowing that he'd be an idiot to not let her be on that ship.
Yep, and I think we saw Commander Ed Mercer turn into Captain Ed Mercer at that point when he put the good of the ship and the crew and everybody ahead of his own personal feelings, and those
totally.
values started to align.
Totally, and we didn't talk about this prior, but they do get along. The way that they made fun of the Doctor. Like, they have a repertoire. You said this with
they did. They had a great repertoire. Great. You discovered a banana ray, an anti-banana ray.
Yeah.
Does it work on all fruit? How about salads?
We want more of that. That's perfect. It's perfectly placed. And you know what? Maybe he's keeping her for some joy in his life too.
Yes, there could be a lot of reasons there. But I do think there definitely is. In addition to good to the crew, that he doesn't mind having her around himself.
Yeah.
Probably because he realizes, man, I could have done things differently too.
I think that's right. We have in this series redemption arcs, proving, coming of age arcs, and romance arcs, and futurist. There's a lot of things to be looking forward to, and I can see why we're fortunate enough to get a season 3.
I could not agree more. I cannot wait. I'm going to dig right into the next episode after this.
Well, I love your perspective, Mike. I'm looking forward to unpacking this with you every week, if not bi-weekly, depending on how many episodes we need to do in a week to catch up to the premiere of the season 3 episode.
Could not be happier with how today went. Really, really enjoyed working with you. And the plan is for anybody listening that we'll drop an episode, at least one episode a week from now until season 3 of the Orville premieres on March 10th. And then continue with our examination of the Orville week by week at that point.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts about this show and about the Orville. If you saw something that we missed, we'd love to hear about that too. Mission Log, The Orville, is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.